Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Jeaneen Tang. She is a speech language pathologist with over 20 years of experience working with early intervention to the elderly. She specializes in language development and has a passion for training parents, caregivers, and other educators on how to best to address the rest needs of young children with learning to understand and express themselves. Welcome to the show, Jenny.
Thank you so much, AJ. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about how one can boost their child's language skills. We'll come to this. But first, let's understand a bit about you, Janine, so that people know who they are listening to and also your journey so that people can learn a lot from that itself.
Perfect. So I've been a speech language pathologist for 23 years now, and that seems like a very long time. And it is, and I love it. I love my job. And people ask me, how did you get started doing speech therapy? And I really have to go back to when I was 8 years old and my grandfather was ill. He had lung cancer. He ended up passing away. And at the time, I felt very helpless. I wanted to help this man I loved dearly. And I didn't know how to do that because I was 8 years old. So it really sparked this need to help people, this want to help people. And I thought maybe I'd be a teacher. And then in high school, I started playing sports and I learned about physical therapy. And I thought maybe that would be something I could do to help people, be a physical therapist. And I knew that you needed a graduate degree at the time to be a physical therapist. So I got my undergraduate degree in something else I love, which is English literature and creative writing. And, when it came time to apply to graduate school, it seemed like everybody was going to go and be a physical therapist. And one of my friends had asked me, have you thought about speech therapy? Because I had done some competitive speech competitions in high school and college, and I hadn't really heard about speech therapy before, but I found out the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where I'm from in Hawaii, they had a program there, a graduate program, and they were actually offering a stipend. If you went to school and you worked for the school district for 3 years, they would actually pay for school. And so I didn't have a graduate school debt, which was great. And then I got to work with amazing children with them growing up. And I worked for 4 years in Hawaii. And then I got this acting bug. I really wanted to be an actor. And so I moved to Los Angeles in 2005. And I learned very quickly that, I thought I could be a waitress and be an actor at the same time, but I was working like 60 or 70 hours a week as a waitress, sorry, as a waitress. And I just was so tired. I was like, well, why don't I do speech therapy part time? And I could work half the amount of hours and still try and do acting as well. So I worked for 4 years in the school district here in Los Angeles. And then I found early intervention, which is 0 to 3 years old. And that population is they're so wonderful. They're a little bit gross because they have boogers most of the time and they're a little bit crazy. But they're like, they're little people that you can nurture and work with and see such progress. Because some of them are nonverbal when you start working with them, and when they start to become communicators and start talking, it's just amazing. And I still work with adults in hospitals twice a week, so I still do have a passion for that as well. And what brought me to this point in my therapy career, I think it took a turn when I had my son in 2012. I became a mom. And then in 2013, unfortunately, he had a tragic accident and fell off of our bed. And the bed, even though the bed was very low, it was only the box spring and the mattress. It was literally 18 inches off the ground. He fell in the most perfect way to have this large brain bleed. And we didn't know at the time because there was no cut or abrasion on his head. He cried and then he passed out. And we rushed him to the emergency room. They did a CT scan of his brain. They saw the bleed, and they rushed him in to have an emergency craniotomy. And a few days later, he had a stroke. And that really changed our world because we had this perfect baby, and now we had a child with a disability. And they said he might never walk or talk, but he's going to be 12 very shortly. And, he's doing amazing things. He still doesn't use his right arm or hand functionally. He can't do anything with it. But he can play basketball and shoot with his left hand. He can do taekwondo. He loves music. He loves singing. We call it karaoke in Hawaii, but the rest of the world calls it karaoke. But he loves singing with the microphone and singing along to the words. And he's just this amazing child. And you know, when I was a speech therapist early on, I loved working with kids with disabilities, but didn't think I could be a parent of one because it was a lot of work. I saw these parents struggle. They were just, these kids are requiring so much attention, and you can never take a break from being a parent. And when I became a parent of a special needs child, it gave me a greater perspective, and it made me have a greater sense of empathy. It also allowed me to have better rapport with my clients and their parents because I could relate to exactly what they were going through a lot of times. Where if you're a therapist and you're not a parent, or you're a therapist and you have a normal child, it's a lot harder to have that same rapport, have that same point of view because you don't live in that world. And working with these kids, um, it really opened up the idea of creating a greater impact in the world. I'm just one person, and I can't replicate myself, but I can replicate the knowledge that I have and apply it by writing a book that's very simple for people to read, and hopefully it'll reach everybody across the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we'll come to the book part. Janine, first, let me understand for the audience also that kids generally talk much. And they talk so much that parents have to ask, request them to give them some, peace in their life. Please, keep silent for some time. Why is it that some kids or most of the kids speak so much and some kids are not able to? Help us understand this part. Is there, or should we understand that there is a problem? How should, as a layperson, one should look at these things?
Yeah, there's definitely a range, right? A range of children and their abilities. Some kids are completely normal developing, and they speak at the rate that they are supposed to, kind of the average. There's these kids who at 2 years old, they're speaking in full sentences, having full conversations. And then there are also these children who are 1.5, 2 years old, who are barely saying anything at all. They're barely babbling. They have very few words. And for the kids that fall into this last category, these are the kids who would require speech therapy. And a lot of these kids, unless they have an underlying disability, like say they have autism or they have Down syndrome or something else that's impacting their health and development, if they're normal developing in every other way, physically, cognitively, a lot of times these kids are raised by parents who really love them, caregivers who really love them, but do too much for them. Like they are over anticipating their child's needs and acting upon that and doing a lot for the child. And the child's not able to interact with their environment naturally. They're not able to learn how to indicate what they want or what they need. The parent is making sure the child is dry, that the child is fed, that the child has toys, that the child, is entertained. And then this child needs to learn how to communicate, but they don't know how to do that because they weren't given that opportunity.
Right, right. There was this popular song which said, "Teacher, teacher, leave us kids alone." I think that the kids will now say, "Parents, parents, leave us kids alone while we are growing up." So, does it mean that parents should uh, leave the kids alone, let them do their work, let them learn, and just keep on watching? How should they know? How would they know when to take care and when to just keep on looking.
Yeah, so when a baby, right? A baby can't really do anything for themselves. But as they start to be, 6 months, 9 months, a year, when they should be moving, reaching, grabbing for things and, indicating by either crying or vocalizing, that's when the parent should, understand what the child might need, but also play what I call play dumb is you anticipate but mindfully under anticipate. You know what the child needs, but mindfully wait and see what the child might be asking for or indicating for, and simple things like offering, like when my son was getting dressed when he was little, I would show him the two different t-shirts and say, "Would you like the red shirt or the blue shirt?" And I would hold it about shoulder width apart. So if he did even look at one of them and he wasn't able to say it, I could say, "Oh, let's wear the red shirt. I love red. Let's put this on." Like I could then talk about that red shirt and what we do what we call language bombardment. We kind of bathe the child in some words and language so they can hear what different words and communication is sounds like.
Right, right. Uh, some children, it's all nature. Some children speak a bit later on, and it is so. How should one know whether they should wait? Is there a particular time period which is a cutoff period that okay, beyond this, if the child is not speaking as much or not, then there is a chance, there is need for intervention. How do you get started at this point in time?
Great, that's a great question. So there are some kids who are late talkers, and people say, "Oh, I didn't talk till I was 3 or 5 or whatever it was," but we do want to nip it in the bud, right? We want to make sure that we are getting this early intervention in as early as possible. So if a child is not babbling between, start to babble 6 to 9 months and then start to get that real word around 1 year and then start combining words by 2 years old, right? You want to make sure that, if they're not hitting that first milestone of one meaningful word around 1 years old, that's a red flag that you are watching out and saying, are they babbling with inflection like adults? Are they copying, different animal sounds, vehicle noises? So those are really significant milestones to hit. Are they babbling between 6 and 9 months? Are they starting to vocalize with intonation between 9 and 12 months? Are they saying a real word with intention consistently, whether it be ball or mama or dada? Is something that is meaningful, right? Some people say, "Oh, my child said mama," but they're not really saying it; they're just babbling it. But if they're saying mama and it means for mother, they're using it consistently. That's what's important. And between 1 year and 18 months, you want them to continue to get a lot of single words. And between 18 months and 2 years, combining those two words together. So those are some milestones, and if their child's not hitting those, I would definitely, reach out and find out where you can get some help, because you don't want the child to be behind. And, we've had a lot of parents who wait till the child's 2.5 years old and they still don't have very many words at all. And then, early intervention ends at 3 years old. So they're kind of missing out on all this free, very helpful intervention that could help the child along with their communication.
Right. Are there things that parents themselves can do in the initial stages? What are those things, if there are, and how long they should try those?
Absolutely. So, having that connection with your child through eye contact, through touch, is really important, because you're building this connection and you're building this idea of a communicative partner, even though it's nonverbal sometimes, right? And then it's always great to sing songs with your child, read books with your child, point to different pictures in the book. You can have different items that they can hold. You can have even like real food. You can show them, this is an apple and it's round and red. This is a banana. It's long and yellow. So you can do all these things where you can talk about your environment, because a child doesn't know vocabulary unless they're introduced to it, right? And also simple things like when a child is having snack, you can, instead of giving them a whole bowl of goldfish, you might put a few goldfish on their plate and then have the rest of the bowl of goldfish nearby but out of reach. So they can indicate either reaching for it or learning how to sign for more or signing for please, or try to say more or say goldfish or whatever it is. So that part is the sabotage, right? You know what the child wants. You know they want the goldfish, but the sabotage is creating opportunities that are functional for them to practice language.
Right, right. And when do you come into the picture? And before that, what is this uh, speech therapy? And you are a speech language pathologist. Means how are these two things? Are they the same thing or different things, or are there different mechanisms to to do things on the ground?
Yeah, so speech language pathology, that is the technical term. And oftentimes we say speech therapist because it's a little bit easier, it's a little shorter to say. It's everybody kind of knows what a therapist is, but not everybody knows what a language pathologist is, right? So we understand the mechanisms to create speech. We understand what we have to go through to understand language, and then also how to express language as well. So we understand the nuances of how to learn language and how to teach someone how to work with their child or themselves on how to build their language and speech. So, people often ask me, like, what does speech therapy look like? And, for 0 to 3 years old, it often looks like play, because
Okay.
it is play, because we're interacting, but it's structured play. Sometimes it's child led, where we see what the child is interested in, because in order to get a child to do something, we want them to be motivated, right? I have my godson who's going to be 15 in February, but when he was 9 months old, he was not crawling yet. He would just kind of lay there because everything was done for him. Everything, he was tended to, he was carried. And there was a point where I was like, well, he needs to learn how to move on the floor and move his body. And he really liked this slinky toy I had. It was a rainbow slinky. And I saw him, he would turn and try to reach for it, but he couldn't move, because he was a big baby. So I would tempt him with it. I would have the slinky near him and I would pull it away. And I would tempt him with it. I would pull it away. And slowly by slowly, he started wiggling his body, starting to kind of slither across the floor eventually. But it's like that temptation of something that motivates them and getting them to, react to that. So that's a part of speech therapy as well, I think, right? That communication, that interaction where they can understand that they want something, and then indicate that they want to get that item or get that thing.
Right. So why do so many children nowadays need this thing called speech therapy? Is it that they have all issues, but then why didn't these issues were there, say, 20 years, 30 years before, and it's there nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, there are children who absolutely will need speech therapy, right? We have these children with autism that are nonverbal. We have these other kids with Down syndrome. My son had traumatic brain injury, a stroke, that definitely these kids need speech therapy. They need in-depth speech therapy. But then there's these other children as well who possibly would not have needed speech therapy if their parents were just trained a little bit better. I think we are in a world of our helicopter parents. You've heard of that, right? Where these parents are making sure that everything is tended to, that every child is going to be, is safe, and everything is done for these children. And so these kids learn, they're not, because they're smart, they learn that, oh, I don't have to try and communicate because I'm going to be given this toy. I'm going to be given what I want. I'm going to be entertained. And so I think we come from, in my book I say you either become the parent that you had, that because your parents were so good, or you become the opposite, right? So if you had an absent parent, then you do the complete opposite and say, I'm going to be such a great parent to my child. And by doing that, you think being a great parent is tending to all your child's needs. But in actuality, it does hinder the child because you take away those opportunities for that child to naturally communicate.
Right, right. There is much to learn from you about these things. We'll come to the book, but one more thing I want to understand is like it happened with your child. He fell from the bed. And children, all across the world, at one point or the other, uh, parents are scared. Sometimes it happens also. They fall from bed or from anywhere else. And sometimes, it means nothing at all. They are all fine, but sometimes it can impact. Many people all across the world are not in a position to always go to the doctor, or maybe initially they think the child is fine, nothing, everything is fine externally, nothing looks like that something has happened. How should they evaluate these things, especially from the point of a child, and especially in terms of speech? How should they be noticing it from a parent, and when should they again get any help if needed at that point in time?
Yes, absolutely. So, my son, when he fell, he cried and then he passed out. He lost consciousness. So that was a huge indication there was an emergency and we needed to get him help right away. I've, all parents have told me, my child fell out of the crib, my child fell off the bed, my child fell off this playground equipment. Um, and when the child doesn't lose consciousness, right, they are alert. You want to make sure that they are alert, that there's no bump or indication that there was a hard impact on their skull, right? You want to make sure that that happens, that you make sure you check out their head. You want to make sure that they don't start to get drowsy, right? Because you want to make sure there's no concussion. So if you're not able to get to the doctor, you're not in a place where it's accessible, you want to look for alertness. You want to look for if they start to lose consciousness or become sleepy, if there's any abrasion or indication that there is swelling in the brain or the skull, and you want to make sure that they are not regressing, right? So if the child is able to follow directions and able to communicate before they had fallen, you want to make sure that they maintain that. If you see any kind of regression, any loss of understanding, any loss of expression, you definitely want to seek out medical attention.
Right, right. And in terms of, the when you fall or when you meet with an accident, either it's a child, because the child cannot speak, even elderly, uh, your speech gets impacted. What are the avenues right now? Do we have enough avenues, enough sort of uh, equipment, or have we developed to that level, that, or your speech therapy, has it developed to that level that it can bring that speech back to that same old level, especially for people who are a bit older? Can it do that, or we still are waiting for some more breakthrough, in terms of science, in terms of neurology and all this? How much should they expect if there is a impact on speech? How much should a parent or elderly expect from science in terms of getting their same level of speech back?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? Because it really is individual, right? Every brain is different. How a brain is injured is can be different from one person to the next, and how the brain is able to repair itself will be different from one person to the next. So you can never say that I can guarantee that your child will get back to where they were, or that an elderly person will get back to where they were. I don't think that there is enough technology, at least not accessible to the general public, to be able to ensure any of that. But we can definitely provide strategies and exercises to get that person as close to where they were before, and provide strategies to further them, especially a child, right? A child who is still developing growing up is hopefully going to be able to have more neuroplasticity, right, in their brain. Because my son, he had a very large brain bleed on the left side of his hemisphere, a very large brain bleed. And that is where your language center is, right? So, but he was 13 months old. So you would imagine that his language center is somewhere else in his brain, because when they look at the scans of his brain, there's really so much damage on that side that his language is so good that there's his language can't possibly be coming from there. So I think the brain is very able to, rewire, but it does take diligence and, getting the intervention as soon as possible. So if an elderly person has a stroke or a brain injury, if they wait too long to get services, to get therapy, it's going to impact their ability to get back to what we call baseline. It really will.
Now let's learn a bit from your book, Play Dumb and Sabotage. It's a nice name. What does it mean? And how does it relate to this whole sabotage? How does it relate to speech therapy?
So the subtitle of my book is Mindfully Under Anticipating a Child's Needs and Creating Opportunities to Practice Language. And that it's kind of explaining play dumb and sabotage because, like I said, we over anticipate. We know what the child needs or wants, and so we overthink it, and that way, a mindfully under anticipating is knowing what they want, but playing dumb, like we don't know, so that the child can have this opportunity to indicate what they want or need. And the sabotage is kind of like repetition, right? We think about if we're going to play basketball and shoot a free throw, we want to make sure that we practice that free throw rather than just shoot it every once in a while. Our consistency and our success is going to be greater if we're able to practice it over and over. So whether it be for snack, having a little bit at a time and indicating for more, or having the child's favorite toy in sight but out of reach, right? So they can indicate that they want more. Or the little wind up toys where you wind it up and let the toy do its action, and then the child can ask for more. Or bubbles, right? Having that sabotage of you're blowing the bubbles, so it ends, that activity ends, but they can ask for more. So finding ways that you can create opportunities to practice language. But other things too, like I would put my son's shorts on my head, when he was little, as a hat, and try to see if he would be like, what are you doing? Or that's not where it goes. So being silly. And I always tell parents, don't be afraid to be silly and play, be animated, and be over exaggerate, right? Some things, children love to be smarter than adults, right? So I might ask a child, oh, does a dog say ba, right? They're like, what are you talking about? That's stupid. That's so dumb. What are you thinking that? Or, I might point to something in a book and ask them, is this a car when it's an animal or something like that? So I'm playing dumb. I'm trying to initiate this interaction where they in turn will naturally tell me, oh, that's not correct, or try to correct what I'm saying. So it's a lot of strategies to help to uh, engage the child, build rapport, have fun, and also practice those opportunities to practice language.
Absolutely. And who is this book for? Is it for the parents or is it for, you know, other people?
I think it's for everyone, right? Anybody that comes into contact with a child. I would love for every parent to be able to, read this book before they have kids, or when their children when their children are still babies, because parents go through birthing class. We learned how to give birth, how to put a diaper on, how to feed the baby with a bottle, and all this stuff. But we don't really get taught how to interact with our children, how to play with our children, how to introduce language, how to practice language. And, it goes the same with like even preschool teachers. I was doing a training with some preschool teachers, and I found out that really didn't know what the milestones for language were and how to introduce language and how to practice it. So anybody who works with a child, anybody that has a child, right, has grandchildren, nieces or nephews, I think it's very important because, you know, to build confident speakers is so, it's so rewarding and gratifying. And these are our leaders of tomorrow. So we want to have them be as successful as possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is much to learn from you about these things, Jeaneen. And I'm sure a lot of people would like to learn from you, about your book. What is the best way for them to do so?
They can go to my website. It's playdumbandsabotage.com. And there's a link for my book. There's a link to my social media, which is Instagram or Facebook. And then we also have, a way to contact me if you have any questions, if you want to get on a mailing list. And then I'll also be posting like these podcasts as well, so they can get some information about, different people I'm conversing with around the world. And I'm so excited, to speak to you in India.
Wonderful. Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.